Everybody, welcome to my channel. Welcome back to those of you who've been here. I am going to be talking today about a video. It's a video response to a video I saw by Ivy the Occultist about our witchcraft books failing witches. And so I think it's a really great video. I'm going to link it down below if you want to go check it out. But I just wanted to share some of my thoughts about this particular subject because I think it's one of those subjects that kind of reemerges and reappears every so often. And it's one that I've seen, discourse about for quite a long time because I've been practicing witchcraft for a long time. So I've seen trends all the way through the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s up until today, because I've been practicing witchcraft from probably about since I was 15 or 16. So that is some form of witchcraft, so probably 1990. So it's been a long time. So I have a lot of thoughts to share about that, and I thought that I would come on here and also ask you what your thoughts are about it, because I feel like this is a subject that comes up every so often. So in her video she talks about how a lot of people complain that there's so many beginners books out there, and that there aren't a lot of books with just sort of a lot more meat on the bones, or that go into depth about things. And also that there's just seems like there's a lot of just really crappy books that are flooding the market. And I think that this has sort of always been an issue, but I think that there's a couple of things these days with that sort of exasperating it, I think, a little bit more than maybe what was happening traditionally. So to start off, just I started practicing witchcraft, like I said, a teenager back in the late 80s, early 90s. And during sort of the mid 90s, I would say there was this upsurge in popularity of Wicca. And so back then, if you wanted to find a book about witchcraft, you were going to find Wicca books, right? And that is how I'm based, my practice is based in Wicca. That's where I come from, right? So there were books on the market. You had to we didn't have, the internet wasn't what it was. It was just starting, right? So you had to actively go and find books. You had to go to a bookstore, and there were specialty bookstores. You had to kind of metaphysical stores would have more stuff. But then when it started to sort of gain in popularity, publishers noticed this, and you started to have regular bookstores, having more of these kind of books, and it becoming just more readily available. And whenever something becomes popular, it's sort of publishers, any company, any industry, are going to get on it and be like, hey, people like this, let's produce more things. And you're always going to have to weed out sort of the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. You're always going to have to go and find the good ones. And there's going to be a lot of just the same regurgitated stuff. And there's going to be stuff that isn't as good. And I think that's just something that I've seen come and go, because I've been around a long time. And in the 90s, I remember there were certain books that were better than others. And I would, read one book and then read another. And some of them I noticed after a while, especially when I wasn't new anymore, I started to realize it's the same. They're kind of saying the same things. And so you had to kind of be, discerning. And even then there was talk about how you shouldn't just, believe everything in a book. You shouldn't be like, this book is the only thing, and I have to follow everything in this book. And there were certainly people who thought like that, but it was kind of take what works for you, leave the rest. And there were some books where, they were definitely much better written, much well written, much better written than others. But I think that that's something that just happens in any genre when it becomes popular, is that there's always going to be, people trying to turn out the same thing that was popular to jump on the bandwagon. And so I think there is always going to be a certain element of that. And, whenever something becomes trendy, people want to jump on it. And you have people who, maybe don't have a lot of experience in something, who claim to have the experience they don't, or who are like, oh, this is popular, I better switch it to this now. And I've seen, I've just been around long enough to see trends come and go. And so, Wicca was kind of the thing in the 90s. And part of that was because of the satanic panic. People were very careful about witchcraft and coming out as witches, because depending where you lived, you could lose your job. You might even get your children taken away. Like it could lead to all sorts of repercussions. And, in some parts of the world and some parts of, the United States, it still can be an issue depending on the community that you're living in. So, but back then it was like that was a little more prevalent. And so people were very much like, no, witchcraft, Wicca isn't bad. And it was very much like, this isn't something to be scared of, because people didn't want to have those repercussions being so close to the satanic panic. So then that wave was kind of there in the 90s. And then there was sort of another bit of a wave in the 2000s. The 2000s, I feel like there was sort of this upsurge in a lot of new age type thinking and new age popularity, especially when like The Secret came out. You had a lot of sort of like copycat books, and there was a lot of that kind of manifestation culture coming into witchcraft practice. So that was like a trend. And again, there were some books about that were better than others. And you had a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon and copying that to, kind of go with the trend. And again, publishing companies, they're like, hey, this sells. So, that's what they go for. And then I've found in the last decade, it's become, oh no, we don't practice Wicca, it's traditional witchcraft. And I found that like a lot of the traditional witchcraft is repackaged Wicca. Not all of it, certainly. Again, there are always going to be those books that are a lot better than others, but it's like there's this distancing of Wicca, right? Like right now, it's trendy to be traditional witchcraft, right? So that is the direction they're going on. And I've literally seen books that I saw like in the 90s and 2000s that were about Wicca, that they've really just changed the title on the book. And now they're repackaging it as traditional witchcraft. So there is, I think, always going to be that element because of, trendiness, right? And following the trends and, publishers wanting to go where the money is going, right? So I think that's an element of it. The other element, like people saying, oh, there's not a lot of books with meat on the bone, is just beginners' books are always going to be more popular. They're the ones that sell, so they're going to be the ones that are more popular. And a lot of people, they might get interested in it for a while, and so they read the beginner books, but they don't delve further into it. And I know that's frustrating for those of us who've been around longer, because we want stuff with more in-depth, information. We want people who are diving deeper. That tends to be more niche though. And so there is less of a market for that. And that's why we don't have as many of those books. One of the nice things about what's happening now is that independent publishing has become more popular, so that I think that it does make some room for these books that are a little bit, deeper and go into more niche subject matter. But because they don't have the distribution or the marketing behind them, it sometimes can be a little bit harder to find them. And you really have to, listen to people's recommendations and word of mouth and things like that. And, find out, what people are talking about. You have to kind of do a little bit more research to find those things. But I think just, there's beginners books are always just going to be more popular. Now, just because something is a beginner's book doesn't mean that it's a bad book, doesn't mean that it's not good. There are certainly better beginner books than others. For example, I'm going to show here, we have Mastering Magic by Matt Aaron. He also wrote Psychic Witch. I'm going to do a full review of this. I'm like halfway through this book. But these are excellent beginner's books. And even as someone like me who's practiced for a long time, I can read this and get a lot out of it. I think it's a really good reminder of certain practices. It's good to see how other people do these practices. And so I think it's just because something is a beginner's book doesn't mean that it doesn't have like some meat on its bones, doesn't mean that it's not, it can't go in depth or you can't learn something from it. So, there's definitely excellent books out there. You've just, like I said, you got to find them amongst, all the other kind of stuff going on. I think one of the other factors that's going on right now that wasn't a factor when I was younger back in the 90s is social media. And so what happens is now when somebody wants to become an author, often, if they want their book to be published by a publishing house, the publishers will say, well, how many social media followers do you have? And so what we end up having is, people who have large social media followings being offered book deals or getting book deals. Now, just because somebody has a book deal because they have a large social media following does not mean that book is bad. It doesn't mean that. There are people who, because they have a large social media following for a reason, they have it because, they have something important to say, or people resonate with them, or it's well presented, the information that they have. And so for some people, definitely, them maybe getting a book deal is somewhat justified. But then there's other people, and I'm not going to name any names here, but I've seen people who have a social media following who get a book deal, and honestly, it's like, I read the book and I'm like, this is garbage. And it's because the publisher just cares about selling books. They don't really care that the content is good in the book. They just want to sell those books. I've also seen too where somebody maybe has a large social media following, or they are friends with other people with large social media followings who promote their book. And so people go, oh, I'm going to buy this book. And then there was one in particular I read, and I did do a review like a while ago, that I was like, I don't understand why people are promoting this book. Like, I was just like, this is not good. And that's my personal opinion, right? But I just was like, this is a case of like social media. The thing is too with social media is often that there are people who have a particular aesthetic, and they have like, the beautiful Instagram, they have like the beautiful TikToks. And so lots of people follow them, and that's great. I love a pretty picture too. I love pretty things, but they get the deal, and that doesn't always translate into being able to write a book, right? Like, it doesn't always translate into like having something important to say. And that doesn't mean that, their videos aren't, like, the videos may be very lovely to look at. Doesn't mean they can write a book. And so what you're having is that, you have people getting book deals that aren't necessarily writers, or, don't necessarily have like, the teaching skills to share with people. So that, I think, is a factor that wasn't happening before. Now, somebody that I want to show you books that are good, not books that are bad. And so somebody that has a large social media following that I think, is a good writer, is we have here Rebel Witch by Kelly Ann Maddox. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything in this book. I don't necessarily agree with everything that she has to say, but I think that this book is a good beginner's book, and it's somebody that has a large social media following that definitely, can write a book. And this goes beyond, like, to me, it's a beginner book, but it has a lot of ideas in here that are not your usual kind of ideas that you find in sort of your beginner type book. And I should do a full review of this one as well. So, she has a lot of the same things that you would see in a beginner book about like ritual and tools and divination. But she also gives like things like how to pick your own sacred text, how to make your own wheel of the year, using Ouija boards, which is something that people kind of like stay away from on that. She has things about like making your own, psychic altar and things like that are just like a little bit outside the box from what the normal kind of thing is. So this is somebody that, they have a large social media following, but they definitely, like it's somebody that, deserves to have a book deal, in my opinion. But then there's others where I'm like, why did somebody give this person can't write? So, because one does not necessarily translate to the other. I think the other thing that's happening now, and I'm curious to see where this goes, is the whole AI thing. It's not, obviously this is only just starting to be a thing. But you have, Ivy had pointed out, I can't remember the name of the author, maybe a real person, maybe not a real person, who has just written way too many books, more than like humanly possible, on such a variety of subjects that it seems weird. And so you have these AI authors, but you're not, obviously because a person isn't writing it, they don't have any personal experience, and they're just regurgitating things other people have said. And I think, I have this whole thing about the ethics of AI because they are training it based on the work humans have done and then not compensating those humans. Also, AI gets things wrong a lot of the times because, again, it's not a human, right? So a lot of ethical questions about AI, but it's also kind of just putting onto the market just more crap, like more garbage. Because, like, again, It's pretending to have authority when it doesn't. It's just a program, right? It's just regurgitating things. And so that's going to lead to an awful lot more books that are just not good and people just getting bad information. There's lots of studies that shown that they'll ask the AI something and it'll come back with something that isn't true. Now, the AI doesn't know that it's wrong because it got the information somewhere on the net, but it's not correct information, but there's no way for it to know that. So a lot of dangers with the AI, and I think that that is exasperating the problem of just more garbage out there. There's just more not so good books. Um, and with the thing with there being less in-depth books out there, you do have to search for them. Another book I'm going to show you here that these are all relatively recent books I'm showing you that I got that is in depth is the I Ching, the Oracle by Benabel Wen. All of Benabel Wen's books are extremely in depth. Like, look at this book. Look at this book. I'm only, like I said, I'm just partway through it, but it's an 800-page book. And it is very in-depth, lots of history, lots of background in here. So, there are in-depth books out there for sure. You just gotta know where to look, but also there's, the authors that you trust to go more in depth. Also, Chris Brennan is another one that he hosts the astrology podcast. He also wrote Hellenistic Astrology, the Study of Fate and Fortune. That is a very in-depth book as well. And now something does not have to be like 800 pages just to be in-depth, but they are out there. Cosmos and Psyche is another one that's very in-depth. So they are out there for sure. But again, you got to look for them. So I think there's lots of factors going into why it feels like there's so much junk out there. I think trendiness is one of it. This is trendy topic right now. It'll come and go. It comes and goes. There's always beginner books they're just always going to be more popular than in-depth books. But we also have the issue of like social media, popularity kind of things. And then we also have like the AI issue becoming a thing. And I'm really curious to see where in particular this is going to go. It's a little scary, to be honest, but we will see. But let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think that there is just less good witchcraft books on the market than there used to be? Do you think it's the same? What do you think the factors are in that particular process or particular trend? Pardon me, if that's what you're seeing. What do you think the factors are? Do you agree? Do you disagree with me? You can disagree, definitely, and I'll respectful comments I keep below. I mean, if someone's disrespectful, like whatever, I'll delete it. But I don't mind if people disagree with me as long as it's respectful. It's all cool. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. Let me know what your thoughts are. Again, thank you so much to my patrons. You guys are awesome. I appreciate all of your support. If you want to check out the Patreon, you can check it on the link below. We're learning Lenormand right now. I always have weekly tarot scopes and detailed astrology for the week. You can also get a subscription reading from me, so you get a private reading every month from me. You can check that out down below. You can also check out my Etsy shop for readings. I got to do my plug at the end. You know it. But just thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And I really appreciate all of your comments. You guys are the best. And as always, peace and love and rock and roll.